My name is Sam Delaney, and I was 34 the day a room full of people I barely knew finally heard the thing my own mother had spent her whole life hiding. But go back 5 Thanksgivings before that, and you'd find me at 29, sitting on a lumpy futon in a tiny studio in Hartley, Minnesota, staring at my phone. One voicemail, 38 seconds long. My mother's voice, flat as a receipt. Don't bother coming this year, Sam. Your sister can't deal with the drama. No reason. No apology. Just a click and the first snow of the season sliding past my window. I put my coat on and walked out the door. What happened at a little roadside supper club that night, and what my parents stumbled into 5 years later at my wedding, is the whole reason I'm sitting here telling you this. If your family ever decided you were the problem simply because you noticed things nobody else wanted to admit, then you already know this story from the inside. Stick around because there's a signature on a courthouse document that says more than any speech ever could. Let me back up first. In the Delaney house, there were two girls. Brooke was the younger one by 4 years, and Brooke cried at everything. She cried over report cards. She cried during job interviews. She cried at parking tickets. And every single time, somebody scooped her up and held her. Then there was me. I was the one who called the insurance company after my dad crunched the bumper in a parking lot. I was the one who drove out to sit with my grandmother when her memory started slipping, because Brooke said she just couldn't stand to see her that way. I did Brooke's taxes 3 years straight, then my parents' taxes, then my uncle's, because I'd passed the CPA exam and everyone decided it was simpler if Sam just handled it. I was dependable. I was steady. I was the daughter you phoned at 11 at night when a pipe blew, not the one you called to wish a happy birthday. And I told myself that was okay. I convinced myself that being needed and being loved were the same thing. That the quiet after I fixed a problem was actually gratitude, just a shy kind of gratitude. I was wrong about every bit of it. But the wrongness felt so normal that I wore it like a second layer of skin for years. My mother, Carol, had a little phrase she pulled out any time I said something too honest at dinner. She'd tip her head, purse her lips, and go, "Not now." 2 words that worked like a tiny cage. My father, Doug, had his own move. He'd clear his throat, glance sideways at my mom, and change the subject. If dodging ever needed a face, it was Doug Delaney. And Brooke, well, Brooke had figured out young that tears were money, and she spent them like she was rich. Every family has a person who runs the numbers and a person who runs the story. I ran the numbers. My mother and my sister ran the story, and their version of the story said I was the difficult one. My grandmother was the one exception. Vivian Delaney, 79 when she passed, barely 5 feet tall, hands like warm sandpaper. She taught me how to balance a checkbook when I was in 4th grade, and how to make her wild rice hot dish, the one with cream of mushroom soup and a topping of crushed crackers, when I was in 5th. Every Sunday I drove out to her place, about 50 minutes each way, and we'd stand shoulder to shoulder at her counter. She kept all her recipes in a wooden box about the size of a shoebox, the cards yellowed and soft, her handwriting full of loops and tilts. The hot dish card lived right on top because it was the one she reached for the most. She told me once, stirring slow, "This box is going to you, Samantha. Brooke won't cook and your mother never once asked me for it." She said it the way she said everything, plain and settled, no room for a fight. Grandma Vivian died on a Tuesday in April. By that Thursday, the recipe box was already in the trunk of Brooke's car. I found out at the lunch after the funeral. I asked about it calmly. I promise you, I was calm. And Brooke's whole face folded up. "I can't believe you'd fight me over a dead woman's things while I'm grieving," she said. Loud. Loud enough for my mother to catch it from clear across the church basement. Loud enough for my Uncle Hank to plant a hand on my shoulder and walk me out toward the parking lot like I was the one making a scene. That was the exact moment the word drama got welded onto my name for good. 3 weeks later, I learned that Brooke had sold the box and almost everything inside it at a neighborhood garage sale. $15. I would have bought the whole thing back in a heartbeat if I'd known. But I didn't know. That was how things always ran in my family. By the time I heard about anything, it was already done and gone. After the funeral, the family engine ran the way it always ran. Brooke cried. Carol comforted her. Doug changed the subject. And the story that went around at Thanksgiving, at Christmas, at my cousin Paige's baby shower was that Sam had gone after Brooke at the funeral. Not argued, not asked a question, attacked. I heard it secondhand from Paige, the only cousin who still bothered to text me back. I saw what actually happened, she told me, her voice dropping like she was confessing a sin. But you know how your mom is, I did know. My mother was 58, and she'd survived her own mother the same way she survived everything, by keeping the surface calm no matter what was churning underneath. Carol had grown up as the scapegoat in her own house. Her sisters picked at her father ignored her, and she made it through by disappearing. Then she got a family of her own and rebuilt the exact same machine, except this time she ran it from the top. Conflict was a disease. Agreement was air. And when one daughter kept crying while the other kept explaining why, the easiest fix was to shut up the one doing the explaining. So that's what she did. Not because she was cruel, because she was scared. Because 30 years of avoiding hard conversations had hardened into something she'd mistaken for wisdom. She loved how much Brooke needed her. It made her feel important. And she was quietly threatened by how little I needed her, because that made her feel useless. So she picked the daughter who leaned on her and shut out the one who didn't. I understood every layer of that much later, standing in a courtroom. But back then, all I understood was the math. In our family, telling the truth cost more than staying quiet, and the bill always landed on my desk. There's one more chapter I should mention, because it added a second coat of paint to the label my family had stuck on me. 2 years before my grandmother died, I got divorced. I was 27. His name was Derek, and on paper he looked perfect. Solid job, clean truck, shook my father's hand like he was campaigning for something. But behind closed doors, Derek was a brick wall. No arguments, no spark, no curiosity about anything. I'd come home wiped out from a 12-hour shift during tax season, and he'd be on the couch with a headset on, cold pizza on the counter, waving at me without ever looking up. I tried counseling. He went one time. I tried date nights. He bilayed on 3. After 2 years, I sat across from him at our kitchen table and said something like, "Derek, I think we need to be honest about whether this is actually working." He shrugged. That shrug pretty much summed up the entire marriage. The divorce itself was quiet and quick and uncontested. But the Delaney family version was a whole lot louder. Derek was such a nice young man, my mother told anyone who'd listen. I have no idea what Sam expected. My father shook his head the way he did when his team blew a game, disappointed and a little disgusted. And Brooke posted a photo drinking with Derek at a bar 2 weeks after the papers were signed, captioned with something about how family is family. She had never once posted a photo with me. So by the time that voicemail landed years later, the case against me was already built and airtight. Sam, the one who fought over grandma's stuff. Sam, the one who couldn't hang on to a husband. Sam, the one who turned every holiday into a spectacle. My mother didn't need to explain a single thing when she cut me out. She'd been laying that brick wall for years. All she had to do was say the word drama, and the wall was finished. Which brings me to that November afternoon. I was in my studio apartment, about 550 square feet, with a futon, a desk where I did client work, and a spider plant named Milo that was honestly the only living thing glad to see me on most days. My phone lit up at 5:22 in the afternoon. "Mom." I answered on the second ring because that's what dependable daughters do. "Sam, I'm calling about Thursday." Her voice had that same flat, rehearsed calm she used when she was returning something to a store. Polite, practiced, already checked out. "We think it's better if you sit this one out. Your sister doesn't need the drama." I waited. Surely there was more. Some explanation, some softening, anything. "Okay," she said. "Okay, Mom," I said. And she hung up. 38 seconds, I checked afterward. I saved that voicemail the way you save a receipt for something you know you'll be returning later. Not out of spite, just habit, an accountant's reflex. You document everything, even the things that hurt. Outside, the snow had started. Not the pretty kind. The wet, gray kind that turns to slush before it even lands. I sat on that futon for exactly 9 minutes, and in those 9 minutes I ran through every Thanksgiving I'd shown up for in the past decade. I'd hosted 3 of them myself, cooked for 2 more, driven all the way to Duluth for one when my mom couldn't travel after her knee surgery. I'd brought wine, brought rolls, brought pie, and one year I'd brought an entire 20-pound turkey because Brooke forgot to thaw hers. 9 minutes of counting. Then I stood up, grabbed my coat, and drove to the one place I could think of that might still be feeding somebody who was alone on a Thursday night in November. Kessler's Supper Club sat out on a 2-lane highway just past the edge of town. One of those spots with dark wood paneling, a relish tray on every table, and a buzzing neon sign in the window that probably hadn't been switched off since 1985. I'd driven by it 100 times and never once stopped. The parking lot was packed. Inside, every table held a family, laughing and bickering, and passing the bread, doing all the loud, ordinary things families do on a holiday. The hostess sat me at a little two-top against the back wall. Cloth napkin, one menu, a candle that smelled like cinnamon and being forgotten. I ordered a brandy old-fashioned, sweet, because that's just what you order out here, and I tried hard not to look at the table beside me. It was a big one, 6 seats. 5 people, 1 empty chair. A woman in her early 70s, silver hair cut short, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. A younger woman, maybe 42, cutting turkey into tiny pieces for a toddler. A broad-shouldered, quiet guy next to her. 2 little kids turning their mashed potatoes into a disaster. And that empty chair, the 6th one, pulled back a bit with a full place setting still laid out. Fork, knife, a water glass half full. I found out later that seat belonged to Walt. Walt Whitaker, the older woman's husband, gone 3 years by then from pancreatic cancer. They set his place at every meal. Nora Whitaker spotted me before I spotted her. She told me later it was the way I was gripping my menu. Both hands, white knuckles, like if I let go I might float clean out of the building. She leaned across the gap between our tables, glasses sliding down her nose, and said the thing that cut my life into a before and an after. "Grab your plate, honey. We've got a seat right here." I almost said no. The polite no. The Delaney no. "Oh, I'm fine, thank you, I don't want to be a bother." But Nora wasn't really asking. She was already sliding Walt's water glass over to make room, and her daughter, Katie, was pulling that empty chair around and patting the seat like it had been saved for me the whole night. So I picked up my plate and my drink, and I sat down with a table full of strangers. Nora introduced herself, then Katie, then Katie's husband, Sean, then the 2 kids, whose names went straight out of my head because I was busy trying not to cry. Nora was a retired high school chemistry teacher, 29 years at Hartley High. She taught juniors how to balance equations and seniors how to argue with actual evidence, and she talked with that cheerful bluntness of a woman who'd graded 10,000 lab reports and had 0 patience left for nonsense. Sean was a plumber. Katie was a school counselor. The kids were 5 and 7 and completely focused on the dessert menu. Not one of them asked me why I was alone. They just made space. Then the food came, and that's when the floor kind of dropped out from under me. Nora had ordered the wild rice hot dish. It showed up in a shallow ceramic dish, brown and bubbling, cream of mushroom and wild rice, with that exact crushed cracker topping I hadn't smelled in 2 years. I just stared at it. The smell hit me square in the chest. "You all right there, hun?" Nora asked. I was not all right. My eyes were pouring and I couldn't explain any of it, because the reason was a recipe card, in a wooden box, that my sister had sold for $15 at a garage sale. And that sentence sounds completely unhinged to anybody who's never lost the last thing that still smelled like the person who loved them. I drove home that night with a stranger's phone number in my pocket and the first full breath I'd taken in a year. Nora texted me that following Sunday. "Hot dish Sunday at my place. Bring nothing, and I mean it." I stared at that message for a solid 10 minutes. I genuinely did not know what to do with an invitation that didn't come with a job attached. In my family, every single gathering had a toll. Bring the pie, do the dishes, fix the printer, go handle Brooke's meltdown in the bathroom. Nora's text had no toll, just an address and a time. I almost didn't go. I sat in her driveway with the engine running for 5 minutes, trying to figure out what she'd expect me to do once I got inside. Fix something, organize something, earn the seat. I brought a bottle of wine anyway because showing up empty-handed made my skin crawl. Nora took the wine, set it on the counter, and handed me a mug of coffee. Sit, she said. Not sit and help. Not sit and tell me about your family so I can fix it. Just sit. Her house was small, a split level off a gravel road north of town. Walt's boots were still parked by the back door, 3 years untouched. The kitchen smelled like onions and something baking. Katie was there. Sean was there. The kids were building a tower of blocks on the living room carpet. They treated me like I was already part of the furniture. Not a guest, not a project, just a person who happened to be in the room. I kept bracing for the cost. There wasn't one. Over the next few months, I showed up every Sunday. And every Sunday I brought something. Wine, flowers, a casserole I'd thrown together at midnight because I couldn't sleep. Banana bread. A new shelf bracket for the one I'd noticed pulling away from the living room wall. I was buying my way in the only way I knew how, with usefulness. Nora let it slide for about 5 weeks before she stopped me right at the door, a bag of homemade dinner rolls in one hand and a look that could cut glass in the other. Sam, honey, she said, you keep paying for something nobody's charging you for. I opened my mouth to argue. She held up the rolls. I already made bread. Take these home. Come in, sit down, and quit bringing me your resume. It sounds like a small thing. It was not a small thing. She was the first person in my whole adult life to tell me straight out that my company was the point, not my output. And I had no idea what to do with that. I'm a CPA. I measure worth in things you can hand over. A person whose worth can't be handed over is a person who could get cut at any moment. That's what my family had drilled into me. If I wasn't fixing something, I was disposable. Nora was teaching me a completely different kind of math. You don't earn a seat in this house, she said, pouring coffee like we'd known each other 20 years. You just show up, and the seat's already sitting there for you. I cried in her bathroom for about 4 minutes after that, then washed my face and came back to the table. Nobody said a word about it. Nora just pushed the sugar bowl toward me and said she'd put too much salt in the gravy and not to tell Katie. That was all. And that was plenty. A year went by, then another. Time moves different when you finally stop flinching. I showed up for Katie's birthday in February, Sean's chili cook-off in the garage in March, Nora's garden planting in May, where she handed me a trowel and told me not to go near the peonies, because Walt had planted those and they were temperamental, just like he'd been. I was there for the kids' school play in April, a truly rough production where the little one froze on his one line and Sean, from the back row, whispered it so loud the whole gym heard him. And I was there for Sunday hot dish. Always. Nora kept a chair for me. Not Walt's chair, she never touched that. A different one. An old oak chair with a cracked spindle that she dragged in from the garage and set at the corner of the kitchen table. That's your spot, she said. And she never moved it, not even on the Sundays I didn't come. I know that for a fact because one week I was sick and didn't show, and when I came back the next Sunday, the chair was right where it always was, my place still set with the same yellow placemat she used for everybody else. Nobody had filled it. That little detail, the empty chair just waiting, undid me more than any big speech ever could have. In my old family, my chair vanished the second I got up from it. Here, it stayed. Around that time, Sean's younger brother started turning up at Sunday dinners. Adam Marsh, 36, a furniture maker with hands always stained from walnut oil. He was quiet the way genuinely useful people are quiet. Not because he had nothing to say, but because he was watching first, making sure the whole table was level before he opened his mouth. I noticed him the way you notice a warm room after a long walk in the cold. Slowly, and then all at once. My old life hadn't forgotten me, though. It was just running on its own schedule. About 15 months after I got cut off, Brooke texted. Not an apology, not even a real question. A status update dressed up as concern. Mom says you've been acting weird. Call her, I read it 3 times. Weird. Apparently I'd been weird since the funeral. And before that, dramatic, and before that, difficult. My family could have published a whole field guide to my failures. I didn't answer. Then a second message came in 40 minutes later. Oh, and are you still doing taxes? Mom's accountant raised his rates. And there it was. The real reason, tucked in behind the fake concern like a bill hidden inside a birthday card. I wasn't being welcomed back into the family. I was being invoiced. I put the phone face down on my desk, finished up a return I was working on for a small business over in Riverton, and went for a walk along the river. The water was frozen at the edges and racing in the middle, dark current shoving under the white ice. I stood there and watched it for a long time. I thought about calling my mother. I thought about texting Brooke back with something clean and professional like, I'm not available for tax prep this year, good luck. I thought about all the careful scripts I'd rehearsed over 2 decades of being the steady one. All those measured little replies built to keep the peace without actually giving up the point. Then I stuck the phone in my pocket, walked home, and did nothing. Nothing was the hardest thing I've ever done. Every cell in my body was wired to respond, to fix, to be reliable. Doing nothing felt like holding my breath underwater. But the water was warm this time, and the only person drowning was me. I still had the voicemail. I played it at 2 in the morning on a Tuesday in January, sitting on my kitchen floor with a glass of water and a tax deadline hanging over my head. I don't know why that night. Insomnia doesn't make appointments. I hit play and heard my mother's voice, flat and rehearsed, 38 seconds. And this time I caught something I'd missed before. Behind her words, under that careful tone, a television was going. Laughter. That rolling studio audience kind of laughter. And underneath it, faint but unmistakable, Brooke's voice. She said something I couldn't quite make out, and then she laughed. They were together, watching TV, having a completely normal, cozy evening. And in the middle of that normal evening, my mother had picked up the phone, called her other daughter, and told her not to come home. She hadn't stepped into another room. She hadn't lowered her voice. She'd done it right there on the couch, with Brooke sitting next to her, the same way you'd cancel a dentist appointment. Just another thing to knock off the list. Don't come this year, Sam. Your sister doesn't need the drama. And then right back to the show. I set the phone on the counter. The voicemail had been 38 seconds. The quiet in my apartment after it ended lasted a whole lot longer. All that time, I'd pictured my mother agonizing over that call. Pacing, rehearsing, feeling at least some flicker of guilt. I'd given her credit for an inner struggle she never actually had. She'd made the call from the couch while my sister laughed. During a commercial break, probably. I was the commercial break. That was the night I stopped checking whether my old chair was still at their table. It had been gone long before anybody bothered to move it. 3 months later, my cousin Paige called. Not texted. Called. She talked fast, the way people talk when they already know what they're about to say is going to cost them. I'm sending you a screenshot, she said. Don't ask how I got it, just look. The screenshot was from a group chat called Delaney Fam. I'd been kicked out of it 2 Thanksgivings back. I hadn't even known there was a group chat to be kicked out of. The messages were from the week before. My mother, asking if anyone had heard from Sam. Brooke saying I was ignoring her and probably just being dramatic like always. My father telling everyone to let me cool off. And then the line that rearranged the whole picture. My mother, 10 minutes later. After the holidays, one of us needs to reach out. Brooke's lease is up in March and she's behind. Sam always handles this stuff. Always handles this stuff. Not, Sam might want to reconnect. Not, we should apologize. They weren't missing me. They were missing my function. The one who did the taxes, co-signed the lease, wired the deposit, kept the whole machine humming while the machine locked her out of the house. Don't come, your sister can't handle the drama. But go ahead and leave your checkbook on the porch. I sat with that screenshot for a full day. I printed it out, because I'm an accountant and accountants print things, and I filed it in the top drawer of my desk under a folder labeled reference. I didn't call Paige back for 2 days. When I finally did, I just said thank you. She said she was sorry, and I told her not to be. They'd shown me exactly what I was worth to them, and it had a dollar sign in front of it. That screenshot sat in my drawer for the next 3 years. I never opened it again. I didn't need to. I never confronted them. I never wrote the letter. I never drafted the email. I've read enough of these stories online to know the whole script, the righteous message, the itemized list of everything they did wrong, the big mic drop ending. I skipped all of it. Not because I was above it, but because I'd finally figured something out. Confrontation was their arena, not mine. In their world, any reaction from me was just more material. Anger proved I was dramatic. Silence proved I was cold. Tears proved I was unstable. And a calm, reasonable letter would get forwarded straight to my aunt with a caption about how they'd been right about me all along. So I quit auditing a family that had already written me off the books. Instead, I did what I do when a client's spreadsheet is a total wreck and they refuse to admit it. I closed the file. I didn't delete it. I didn't burn it. I just stopped working on it. Brooke's lease came up in March. I know because Paige mentioned it offhand months later, like a weather report nobody asked for. Your mom ended up co-signing, she said. Guess your dad was furious about it. I felt something when she told me. Not satisfaction, not guilt. Something closer to the feeling you get when you finally stop pressing on a bruise you'd been pressing so long you forgot pressing was even a choice. That spring, I filed taxes for 11 small businesses, rented an actual office on Bridge Street in Hartley, a little storefront tucked between a bakery and a used bookshop, and put my name on the door. Delaney Tax and Accounting. I kept the name. It was on my CPA license. It was on every return I'd ever filed. My mother didn't own it. I'd earned it at a desk, not at a dinner table. My hands were full of work I'd actually chosen, my phone was quiet, and my Sunday chair at Nora's house was always waiting. It happened on one of those June Sundays when Minnesota acts like winter never came up, when the lake goes glassy and the whole town smells like cut grass. By then I'd told Nora about my grandmother. Not in one sitting. In pieces, over months, the way you unpack a box you've been scared to touch. The recipe cards. The hot dish. The $15 garage sale. Nora listened the way she listened to everything, all the way through, never rushing to hand me a solution. Then that afternoon, she set something down on the kitchen table in front of me and told me to open it. It was a little wooden box about the size of a paperback. Walnut, sanded smooth, a hinged lid, a small brass latch. Adam had built it. I knew before she said a word because the wood still carried the smell of his workshop, that mix of walnut oil, sawdust, and fresh-cut grain. I looked at Nora and she just nodded. Inside, on a single index card, was Grandma Vivian's wild rice hot dish, written out in Nora's slanted teacher's handwriting. She'd written it from memory. Not her memory of the recipe since she'd never held Vivian's card. Her memory of my description. I'd rattled off the ingredients to her once, months earlier. Wild rice, cream of mushroom, celery, onion, ground turkey, crushed crackers on top, $3.50 for about 45 minutes. Nora had jotted it down, tuned the amounts with her own instincts, and slid it into a box made by a man who'd barely spoken 10 words to me but had clearly been listening to everyone. I held that card for a long time. Different handwriting, different box, different person. And that was exactly the point. This wasn't a copy of what I'd lost. It was a handoff. Same recipe, new hands, proof that the thing I'd grieved could still get carried forward by people who wanted to carry it. Adam and I didn't move fast. He was Sean's younger brother, 36, and he showed up to those dinners the way a front moves across Minnesota, slow, then settled in for good. He wasn't putting on a show for me. He wasn't trying to win anything. He just kept appearing, Sunday after Sunday, sawdust on his collar, and that steady focus I recognized instantly because I had the same one. Accountants and furniture makers have more in common than people would guess. We measure twice. We check that everything sits level. We don't like surprises hiding in the joints. Our first real conversation happened in Nora's driveway, both of us parked and standing by our cars, neither one quite ready to head home. He asked what I was reading. A tax code update, I told him. He laughed, one short clean sound, like a well-built drawer sliding shut. Said it was the most honest answer he'd ever gotten out of anybody. After that came coffee, then lunches, then long drives out along the Cedar River where we talked about everything except our histories. Mine was a bruise, his was simple. Good parents, a calm childhood, the quiet luxury of never once having to defend himself at his own dinner table. I envied that. What I loved was that he didn't pity me for missing it. The other thing that hooked me happened early on. One evening I caught myself washing his dishes without anybody asking. Pure reflex. Earn the chair. He reached over, gently took the sponge out of my hand, and told me he'd invited me for dinner, not for chores. Just a sponge. Such a small thing. But it was the first time somebody wanted my company instead of my usefulness. Nora watched all of it from her kitchen window, wearing the face of a woman who taught chemistry for 3 decades and knew precisely how long to let two elements sit together before she stepped in. People ask me sometimes if I ever wanted to scream at my family. I didn't. What I wanted was quieter than that, and a whole lot more permanent. By my 3rd year, the office on Bridge Street had a second desk. I'd hired Denise, a bookkeeper and a single mom, and between us we were handling around 38 small business clients spread across 2 counties. I'd bought a used car with cash. I had a savings account that didn't get drained every time Brooke needed a deposit or my parents needed a furnace repair. For the first time as an adult, my money went where I sent it, not where guilt shoved it. I wasn't rich. Not close. But I was solvent on my own, and after years of quietly bankrolling everyone else's crises, solvency felt like a genuine superpower. I filed my own return that April, sitting in my own office, staring at numbers that belonged entirely to me. No free Brooke return. No quick favor for one of Dad's buddies. No emergency transfer to plug a gap in Mom's insurance. Just mine. Cleanest balance sheet I'd ever put together. I printed it and kept it, not because I needed proof of anything, but because some things deserve to sit on paper. I'd built all of it from a lumpy futon, a spider plant named Milo, and a voicemail telling me to stay home. Every figure on that page was a brick I'd laid without asking permission. Nobody in the Delaney family had any idea. Nobody asked. And I finally understood that their not asking was the kindest thing they'd ever done for me. My father called in October of that 3rd year. I hadn't heard his voice in 24 months. Sam, he said, and there was something careful in how he said it, like he was carrying something that might break. Your mother misses you. I waited. And there it was again, that Delaney pause, the gap where the real sentence hides. She misses you. And well, Brooke's going through a rough patch. A rough patch. Same words he'd used when Brooke lost her second job. Same words when she buried the credit card Mom had co-signed. A rough patch was Brooke's permanent address, and somebody else always covered the rent. I appreciate the call, Dad, I said. Short, polite, the tone I used with clients angling for a deduction they didn't qualify for. Was there something specific you needed? He hesitated. We just thought maybe you'd come by. Talk it through. Not apologize. Not admit anyone had been wrong, just come by. Come back to the machine and put your hands on the gears again. I told him I'd think about it, which is accountant for no. He said, okay, sweetheart, and his voice cracked on the second word. A hairline split barely there. The sound of a man realizing he'd lost something and only now starting to measure how big the hole was. That crack stayed with me for days. I replayed it the same way I'd replayed the voicemail. Was it real? Was it a performance? Was there some version of my father who regretted standing beside my mother while she took me apart? Maybe. But regret with no action behind it is just nostalgia, and nostalgia doesn't cover the bills it racks up. He missed the daughter who paid, not the daughter who left. That Thanksgiving was my 3rd at Nora's table, with Katie and Sean and Adam and the kids, older now and Walt's chair still set, and my chair still exactly where it always was. The hot dish recipe was so wired into my memory, by then I could have made it blindfolded. After everyone cleared out, Nora asked me to stay. She poured 2 cups of decaf and sat across from me with her glasses off, which meant she'd been chewing on something for a while. Nora never took her glasses off for nothing. "I want to say something," she told me, "and I want you to hear the whole thing before you answer." I nodded. "You're my daughter," she said. "You've been my daughter since the night you carried your plate over and sat down. Biology didn't make that happen. A voicemail did. A supper club did. You did." She flattened her hands on the table. "There's a legal process here in Minnesota. Adult adoption, it's just what it sounds like. The only consent it needs is yours. Your birth parents don't even have to be told." She let it hang there. I let it hang there. "I'm not trying to swap out anybody," she said. "Your grandmother can't be replaced, and I know that. But I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere, and if you want it written down somewhere official, then I want that too." I stared into my coffee. The kitchen was quiet. Walt's boots by the door, the cracked spindle chair, the recipe box on the counter. The whole house was full of things people had decided to hold on to, and I was one of them. "Nora," I said, "can I think about it?" "Take as long as you need," she said. "The chair isn't going anywhere." I thought about it for 3 weeks. I drove out to Brookside and parked across from my grandmother's old house, which belonged to somebody else now. The garden had changed. The porch had been repainted. There was a tricycle in the driveway that didn't belong to any kid I knew. I sat in my car and talked to Vivian, not out loud. In my head, the way I'd talked to her since she died. "Am I betraying you?" No answer, obviously. But I knew what she'd say because she'd already said it a dozen ways in a kitchen that smelled like wild rice. Family is who stays. Family is who cooks for you when you're worn out. Family is who keeps your chair when you've stepped away. Vivian had been my family. She was gone. Nora was here. And Nora was handing me the exact thing my grandmother would have wanted me to have. Not a substitute. A continuation. A new card in the same box. The adoption would end my legal tie to Carol and Doug Delaney. No inheritance rights, not that I expected any. No legal obligation. On paper, they'd stop being my parents. The thought made my head spin. Then I sat with the spinning and realized it wasn't grief, it was relief. The same relief I'd felt signing my divorce papers. The document finally catching up with the truth. I called Nora that night. "I'm in," I said. She went quiet for a second, then said, "Good, I already talked to the courthouse." When I asked, "October," she said. She'd asked me in November. She'd been ready a month before she brought it up, holding the door open the whole time, waiting to see if I'd walk through. "Nora," I said, "you're ridiculous." "I taught chemistry, honey," she said. "Patience is 90% of the lab. We filed in December." Nora petitioned the district court under Minnesota's adult adoption law. The paperwork was simpler than I expected. A petition, my written consent, a background check, a hearing date. No agency, no home study for adults. Just 2 people saying yes in a way the law could actually hold. The hearing was in February, a Tuesday, courtroom 2C. Nora wore a blue blazer she'd bought new for the day. I wore the same suit I wore to client meetings, partly because it was the only one I owned, and partly because it felt right. I was doing what I'd always done, showing up prepared. Except this time the deliverable wasn't a tax return. It was a family. The judge asked if I understood this would legally terminate the parental rights of Carol and Douglas Delaney, including any right of inheritance. I said yes. She asked if my consent was freely given. I said yes. She asked Nora if she understood the responsibilities she was taking on. Nora said, "Your Honor, I've been taking them on for 3 years. I'd just like the paperwork to catch up." The judge smiled. The whole thing took 8 minutes. I signed. Nora signed. The judge stamped the decree. And just like that, I was legally, permanently the daughter of Nora Whittaker. I kept my last name. It was on my CPA license, on my office door, on every return I'd ever filed. I'd earned that name at a desk, not at a dinner table, and nobody was taking it from me. In the parking lot outside, Nora hugged me. Katie was there. Sean was there. Adam stood a few steps back, hands in his jacket pockets, grinning. "Welcome to the family," Katie said, like I hadn't already been in it for years. "There's always been room," Nora said. She'd said it before. It landed differently with a court stamp behind it. Adam proposed on a Saturday in September, about a year after the adoption. He didn't turn it into a production. We were out in his shop, a converted two-car garage behind his house in Millbrook, sawdust on everything, the radio playing some forgettable country song. He'd been building a walnut dining table for a client over in Glenwood. I was sitting on his workbench with my legs dangling, reading a tax journal, because that's who I am on a Saturday, and Adam had never once asked me to be anyone else. He set down his sander, wiped his hands on his jeans, and pulled a small box out of his apron pocket. Not a jewelry box. A wooden one, hand-turned walnut, about the size of the recipe box he'd made for Nora to give me. He opened it. Inside, resting on a bed of sawdust, was a ring. Simple white gold, one stone. I had a whole speech ready, he said. But honestly, Sam, you're an accountant. You already know the numbers. I looked at the ring, then at him. What numbers? 3 years of Sundays, he said. 1 voicemail. 1 chair. 1 really good hot dish recipe. And every single day I've known you, I've been sure. He paused. Marry me? I said yes before he finished asking. He slid the ring on and it fit. And I thought about how many things in my life had been forced to fit, and how few had just shown up already the right size. We told Nora that night. She cried for exactly 90 seconds, which she later called a personal best for a woman who hadn't shed a tear at her own wedding. Then she asked about the guest list. And your parents, she said. I shook my head. Nora nodded. That was all. We planned the wedding for the following June. Small by some measures, huge by mine. About 110 guests at an old converted mill on the Cedar River. Exposed beams and windows facing the water. Adam built the arch. Nora insisted on the wild rice hot dish for the buffet, which the caterer fought until Nora showed up to the tasting with her own ceramic dish, and a look that said she'd taught 17-year-olds to handle hydrochloric acid and was not about to be pushed around by a man in a chef's hat. The invitations went out in March. Cream cardstock, plain font, one of Adam's woodcut designs on the envelope. Inside, above the date and the venue, the line that mattered. Parents of the bride, Nora Whittaker and the memory of Walt Whittaker. I stared at that line a long time before we mailed them. It was the truest sentence on the whole card. Not revenge, not a correction. Just a fact set in plain type on heavy paper. We sent 110 invitations. 2 people I was related to by blood weren't on the list. I didn't agonize over it. They'd cut me out of a group chat, a dinner table, a family. I cut them out of an envelope. The math was even. Paige got 1. She RSVP'd that same day with a note, sitting on the bride's side. Always was. I cried for about 30 seconds reading it, then went back to the seating chart. What I didn't know, couldn't have known, was that somewhere in southern Minnesota, a wedding photo from Katie's Instagram was about to pop up on a screen I hadn't thought about in years. Brooke was still following Katie. We'd all forgot. The morning of the wedding was warm and clear, the kind of June day Minnesota earns after half a year of cold. The mill smelled like cedar and peonies, and the river sliding by outside, slow and silver. Adam was in a back room with Sean, getting dressed, probably checking his tie with a level. Nora showed up early in a deep green dress she'd bought 3 months back and hidden in her closet the way other mothers hide Christmas presents. Katie was my maid of honor. Paige was a bridesmaid. The 2 kids, older now, took their jobs as ring bearer and flower girl with the deadly seriousness of small people trusted with important cargo. I stood in the bridal room and looked at myself in a mirror I'd paid for in a dress I'd picked, about to marry a man who'd never once asked me to earn his love. The programs were stacked on a table by the door. Second page, same line. Parents of the bride, Nora Whittaker and the memory of Walt Whittaker. 110 people would read it. Some would take it as a tribute. Some would know the whole story. Not one of them would question it. This was my family, and it was on paper. I should back up to the night before. I'd sat on the edge of my bed at 11, phone in my hand, and opened the voicemail. The one, 38 seconds. I'd carried it for years across 2 phone upgrades, moving it each time like a scar you take from house to house. I hit play. My mother's voice, flat, rehearsed. Don't bother coming, Sam. Your sister can't deal with the drama. The TV going behind her, Brooke's laugh, the click. I played it one more time. Then I held my thumb over delete for a good while and didn't do it. I wanted to hold it one more day, not as a weapon, as a measuring stick. The distance between the woman on that futon and the woman about to get married in an old mill on the river. I set the phone on the nightstand. Tomorrow, after the ceremony, I'd delete it. I wanted to walk down the aisle still carrying the weight and walk back without it. That was the plan. The plan didn't account for my mother showing up. Nothing in my carefully filed, meticulously documented life had accounted for that. But I'm an accountant. I know better than anybody that the line items that wreck you are the ones you never budgeted for. The ceremony was over. Short, beautiful, honest. Adam and I wrote our own vows, and his opened with, "You are the most reliable person I've ever met, and that is not why I'm marrying you." I nearly lost it right there. The reception was rolling, the mill warm with candlelight and conversation. 110 people eating wild rice hot dish and laughing and doing all the things people do when the hard part of love is behind them. The officiant stepped up to the microphone and said the words I'd waited years to hear out loud. "Please welcome the parents of the bride, Nora Whittaker and the memory of Walt Whittaker." The room applauded. Nora stood, crying and smiling, clutching her napkin in both hands. I loved her so much in that second that every other loss in my life suddenly felt survivable. Then the back door opened. I saw them before anyone else did. My mother, in a dress I'd never seen, gripping her purse with both hands. My father half a step behind, tie a little crooked. They stood in the doorway like people arriving at a party they weren't invited to, which is exactly what they were. Carol's eyes swept the room, the flowers, the arch Adam built, the guests, the programs on the tables. She picked one up. I watched her read the line. "Parents of the bride, Nora Whittaker and the memory of Walt Whittaker." Her face changed, subtle, a tightening at the jaw, a flicker behind the eyes. The same look she'd worn my whole life right before she said, "Not now, Sam," except this time she didn't say that. She said, loud enough for the nearest tables to hear, "There's been a mistake." I stood, I smoothed my dress. I walked over to her and kept my voice so low she had to lean in. "No mistake, Mom, don't come. Your sister can't deal with the drama." You said that. I was listening. She didn't lean back. She leaned closer, like being near me could undo years and a court order. "Sam, we're your parents. Whatever this is," she said, waving a hand at the room, at Nora, at the program, at the flowers, "we raised you." "You did," I said, same quiet voice. "And then you unraised me on a voicemail during a commercial break." The tables by the door had gone silent. Forks down, eyes up. My mother felt the audience and pivoted the way she always pivoted, from private plea to public performance. She turned to face the room, hands open, voice climbing. "We're her family. We're her real family. Whatever she's told you." "Mom," I said, once. She stopped. "You drove almost 3 hours to get here. Not for my wedding. Not because you missed me." I paused. I didn't need to raise my voice. 100 people were already listening. "You came because Brooke's in trouble again and you need someone to cover it. That's what you've always needed." Her face went white because it was true and she knew it. And now a room full of strangers knew it too. Doug stood behind her, eyes red, mouth slightly open. He started to say something. "Sam," and for 1 second I saw it, the crack, the man behind all that silence. Then my mother grabbed his arm and he closed his mouth. The almost moment ended the way those moments always ended, with her hand on his elbow and his voice backing away. "We're still your parents," Carol said. There was something final in it, something that wanted to be a trump card. I looked at her. "No," I said. "You decided otherwise 4 Thanksgivings ago. It's filed in the county courthouse. It's on this program. 100 people just heard the officiant say Nora Whittaker's name where yours used to go. The truth didn't need volume. It had paperwork. Sean was already on his feet, not aggressive. He was a plumber, not a bouncer, but steady, the way you'd stand when a pipe bursts and somebody has to reach the valve. He crossed to the door, put a hand on my father's shoulder and said quietly, "Maybe we step outside." Adam's college friend Jason, a big guy with a gentle face, appeared at Sean's side like he'd been waiting for exactly that cue. My mother tried one more time. She looked past me toward Nora, and her voice went thin and sharp. This isn't over. People will know what she did. It landed in a room that already knew. A room full of people who'd watched Nora rise when her name was called, who'd seen me walk toward my mother with the calm of a woman who'd rehearsed this moment. Not in anger. In the long, quiet work of moving on. Sean and Jason walked them out. No shouting, no security, just two men and a doorway and the sound of gravel under tires. When I turned around, Nora hadn't moved. She hadn't stepped in. She hadn't needed to. She caught my eye across the room and lifted her glass a little, the way a teacher lifts a pen when a student finally gets the answer right. Katie reached me first. You okay? I wasn't sure. My hands were shaking, but my voice had held, and that was enough. I'm okay, I said. I think I need to eat something. The hot dish is still warm, she said. Of course it was. The DJ read the room and put on something slow. Adam found me at the edge of the floor, took my hand, and we swayed through the whole song without talking. His hand was steady on my back. He didn't ask what happened. He'd heard all of it. He just held on. Then Nora cut in. My turn, she said, and Adam stepped aside with a little bow that made the kids giggle. Nora and I danced the way two people dance when one of them is barely over 5 feet and the other is wearing heels for the first time in a year. Awkward, slow, perfect. You did good, she said. I didn't yell, I said. That's how I know I raised you right, she said. On the buffet, next to the caterer's approved-in tray, sat a ceramic dish of wild rice hot dish with a crust of crushed crackers, brown and still warm. Nora had carried it in herself that morning. It was my grandmother's recipe, in Nora's handwriting, kept in a box Adam built, served at a wedding no one in my blood family had been asked to. Every layer of that dish was a layer of chosen. At the far end of the head table, Paige sat next to Katie, eating hot dish with a fork and quietly crying and pretending she wasn't. She'd RSVP'd bride's side. She'd meant it. 3 weeks after the wedding, I sat at our kitchen table, mine and Adam's, in the house we'd bought together in Millbrook, and opened my phone. The voicemail was still there, 38 seconds. I'd carried it across 4 years, 2 phones, 1 adoption, and 1 wedding. I played it one last time. My mother's voice, the TV, Brooke's laugh, the click. Then I pressed delete. The screen asked if I was sure. I was sure. The phone felt lighter after that, or maybe I did. Paige told me later that my parents sold the lake cabin in August. Brooke's debts had swallowed it. My father took a part-time job at a hardware store. My mother stopped going to church, which in her world was the equivalent of a public collapse. Brooke moved in with a boyfriend over in Fairview. The family I'd left hadn't fallen apart because of me. It fell apart because I'd been the load-bearing wall they pulled out, and then they stood around wondering why the ceiling sagged. I didn't call. I didn't write. There was nothing to gloat about. They were still just people, scared and broken and unable to have the one conversation that might have changed everything. And I was still their daughter by blood, in the way a receipt is still paper after you've thrown it in the trash. Nora came by every Wednesday. Katie called on Sundays. Sean fixed our kitchen faucet without being asked and wouldn't take a dime. The kids called me Aunt Sam and left toy bricks in my shoes. Adam built furniture, I did taxes, and the numbers finally balanced. These days I set 1 extra plate at every holiday and leave 1 chair open for whoever needs it, because the people who choose you never make you audition for the seat.